One of the themes of Knowledge Exchange Violin is layering, the layering of history, the layering of nature, of geology, of migration, of different artistic traditions, of instrument making, and of architecture. So it's exciting for me today to bring the project to Korkyra in Croatia. I'm standing in the Church of All Saints on the city of Korkyra, which is the main city on the same named island, around the corner from where Fitzroy MacLean had his house. The church epitomizes everything I've been talking about, we've been exploring. It was finished at the very beginning of the 14th century, and it's full of accretion upon accretion of different layers of beautiful artistic objects, architectural developments, architectural styles. So behind me, there is a wonderful 15th century reredos with an entombment and all the disciples below, and to the side of me here, the canopy above me is a 16th century ciborum, the canopy which you often find over altars in this part of the Mediterranean. There's an 18th century altarpiece, and above the nave of the church, there's wonderfully sectioned, cassetted 17th century ceiling painting. It's divided up rather similarly to the famous Rubens, which goes over St. James's Palace. Style is very different. It's very much Croatian 17th century style of painting. And the program I've brought here reflects some of the ideas of layering when it comes to traveling artists and traveling composers, just as much as many of the people who made the things in this church or built the church or built aspects of the church traveled here or they were made elsewhere. So it is the same with the music. We have music by Tobias Hume, who of course was a Scottish mercenary, also a viol player who died right in the middle of London. We have music by Nicola Matteis, who was a German origin violinist who came from Italy, from Naples, to work in London. We have music by Torelli, who's most associated with Bologna and with Rome. We have music from Salzburg by Wilsmeier, who comes very much from the Biber school of composition. And from our own time, we have pieces, for instance, reflecting on the culture of this place, a new piece by the Croatian composer Ivan Skender, which is based on Baroque dances from this very island, which is Premeta, and a piece by another Balkan composer, my dear friend Mihailo Trantofilovsky, which itself includes yet more layering because it plays with the idea of the chaconne, the Passacaglia form, and was actually a result of Mihailo and I having a conversation after he heard me play the 20th century Korean composer Jung Isan's reflections on Bach's royal theme from the musical offerings. So that was a 20th century composer reflecting on one of the works of an 18th century composer, inspiring a 21st century composer to reflect on the broad idea of the chaconne, which of course is what happens with a lot of the architecture around me. So for instance, the ciborum here is 16th century, but the tops of the columns are very much, these are Corinthian columns, and they're reflecting on classical architecture. The belfry at the end of the tower of the church here is the newest piece of architecture here, so that was added in the late 1700s. And of course, the most interesting thing for me about a building like this, apart from its form and its shape, is the acoustic. This is really interesting. This is a building which has been designed so that speech and probably music as well is extremely clear. It's on the edge between being a room acoustic and being a hall acoustic. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens when people come into it in this evening. Sometimes what's interesting about people coming into a building is sometimes it can deaden the room, but sometimes with a room that works in the way that this does, it can have the opposite effect. It can provide more interesting reflecting surfaces. And to finish up with just a question of craftsmanship. At the back of the church, underneath what would originally been used for the choir at the back of the church, tacked up against the walls and tucked under the ceiling, which is made by the gallery at the back of the church, are architects' models of clipper ships and some smaller fishing boats, along with hammers and chisels. It's clear that this was the church associated with shipbuilders who built ships in this area, which then would have sailed in the Mediterranean, and those have been put up at the back of the church. I love tools. It's lovely to actually see the tools exhibited in the building, which is quite rare.